Hello. You and I are going to go on a little field trip to Stockholm to bear witness to the death of a king. Obviously, it isn't the death of the current king because he's celebrating 50 years on the throne, but it is a historical king, so we're heading to the National Art Gallery Nationalmuseum. But first, we kind of need to know the story of the historical king, right? In the Viking Age, the land that we today call Sweden was called Svidjod, the land of the Svear. And king of the Svear was a man called Domalde. Domalde was the son of Visbur. Now Visbur had 3 sons. One was called Gisel, one was called Andur, and the third was our main character, Domalde. The 2 older ones killed their father by burning him alive, but it was the third one who became the king. Now the royal family, as you can tell, were haunted and harmed by bad luck. And Domalde's reign was not saved from this either. During his time on the throne, the kingdom of Svidjod was struck down with a terrible famine. The famine lasted so long that people began to believe it was a punishment from the gods. And the capital of Svidjod at the time was Uppsala. In Uppsala, every 9 years, according to historical records, there would be a sacrifice. This would please the gods, and according to Norse mythology, 9 is a magical number. So 9 male creatures of every species would be sacrificed, including humans. To appease the gods and make an end to the famine, the people decided to make a blót before the 9 years had passed. This time it was 9 strong oxen sacrificed, as they thought this would please the gods, oxen being strong animals and all. However, the famine continued, and the next year they decided to try the next best thing, human sacrifice. So they killed 9 humans, people, members of the community, very noble sacrifices. And still this did not please the gods enough to break the famine. So the 3rd year, they did the most desperate thing they could. They decided to sacrifice the king. Now the king, being the most valuable person in the community, the highest ranking one, the one with the most power, he had to be sacrificed in order to appease the gods. And so they did, and Domalde was brought to Uppsala, and he was stripped down, and he was slain. And this was enough for the gods, and the famine ended. So it's the death of this king in this particular story that we're here to see at the National Art Gallery. Remember this house? So in the atrium there's a big painting by Carl Larsson called Midvinterblot, which is the Midwinter Sacrifice. Look, there's the king, but this is what we're here to see. These are the maidens, and what we're going to do is recreate one of the jackets that the maidens are wearing. So we can tell a lot of things from the painting. It's such a monumental painting by Larsson that it's, there's a lot of detail to interpret, and that's what we're gonna do, because you can tell from this jacket that there's probably a seam at the shoulder pretty far down. It's in the stripes, it's in the shape, it's also in the bunching on the other girl's armpit, which you can see over here. And the fabric would bunch like that when there's not a arm's eye. So we're not going to do an arm's eye, obviously, because the painting's telling us not to. Another thing we can tell is that it's probably open in the front, as you can see in this part and in this part where the girl probably has it unbuttoned. Maybe that's why she's making that particular face, because she's so cold and she's asking you to button her shirt so she doesn't freeze her nips off. So because we have so many details in the picture, we can actually tell that no jacket is the other alike. They all have different sort of shapes to the embroidery on it, because I think it is embroidery. But the basics are we need a jacket with no arm's eye, and a shorter midriff, and an open front. So that's what we're gonna do. Now this isn't a Viking Age reconstruction, it's set in the Viking Age, but it isn't going to be a Viking Age fashion reconstruction. This is more based on Swedish folklore clothing, I think. And I have a sneaking suspicion that Carl Larsson actually took inspiration from a knitted garment when he painted this, and I'll discuss that more later. But since knitting wasn't invented until later in the Middle Ages, I'm gonna go and do these in a cloth fabric. So we're gonna need to get some black and grey wool to get this project started. Post! Always remember to pre-wash your fabrics. Cheating is the easiest way to win, so we're gonna base this off a piece I already have, which is actually also a reconstruction of a collage painting, this one called Letter Writing. And if you're a long-time fan of my TikTok, you might know that this is one of the projects that first went viral on my page. Anyway, so we're taking the measurements from this piece, which I know fits me well, so it's gonna work for this project as well. We're doing bust measurements, lengths, arm width and arm length, and that's basically it. So these are my measurements if you want to pause and have a look. No fear, no quarter, no mercy. So we sew all the long seams on the machine, and then we hand fell everything on the inside. Now, if you're someone who likes hand stitching and watching videos of hand stitching, I actually have a whole hour-long video about me hand stitching things and singing, kind of as an ASMR. I'm just gonna sort of sew while I talk, because maybe that'll make me more comfortable on camera. And if you say, oh, Östen, you should script these, nay. So in the 1880s, there was a competition to win the prize of being able to paint the inside of the staircase hall in Nationalmuseet. And one of the winners was Carl Larsson, who got the honor of painting the lower staircase hall with motifs of Swedish history. Now, the upper staircase hall was a different matter. The lower staircase depicted sort of the cultural history of Sweden, like one of our national musicians and some kings and the building of the house and stuff like that. The upper staircase hall was supposed to be more ancient history. So one side, it was said, should be painted with the Saint Ansgar, who was one of the people who came to Sweden to make us Christian. So one side was supposed to be Ansgar, and that was given to Gustav Cederström, the painter, and the other side was as yet undecided with the motif of an ancient story of some kind. However, a new suggestion came in from Carl Larsson, who was, remember, doing the lower staircase hall, but had wanted more cake, I suppose. And he said, let's paint our two national heroes, Gustav I and II. That is to say, Gustav Vasa and Gustavus Adolphus Gustav II Adolf, who were hero kings of Sweden to some degree. Shout out to Gustav Vasa for the 500-year anniversary of kicking the Danes out. That was a bra grej. Sorry about the nationalism. So it was supposed to be Gustav I and his coming into Stockholm at midsummer in 1523. And on the other side, it was supposed to be Gustav II crossing a river, I think, of some kind. Carl Larsson sent in a suggestion for these, and a lot of people supported him because they thought it was a good idea. And as you can tell today, we do actually have a picture of Gustav Vasa's intåg in Stockholm, the heroic return of Gustav I to Stockholm, midsummer 1523. However, on the other side is our subject, which is, as you can tell, not Gustav II going somewhere. It is, in fact, a pagan depiction of a dying king, it being Domalde. It wasn't originally supposed to be Domalde, it was just supposed to be some king sacrificing himself for the good of the nation, apparently. How very anti-royalist. Carl Larsson painted a suggestion and got refused several times. Good on you for coming back for more punishment, but maybe the first 2 times could be a sign that they didn't want it. And that's when he made it sort of a Christ-like picture of self-sacrifice that wasn't appreciated among the royalists of early 20th century Sweden, which also led to more refusing, because no one knew who this person depicted was. No one knew this story. It wasn't as well known as Ansgar or Gustavus Adolphus or someone else. It was just a king from a saga. And so why would we put that up in the Nationalmuseum?
So he wanted sort of a juxtaposition of midsummer life on one side with the king coming back to Stockholm and midwinter death on the other side with another king being slain. An epic version of Swedish history. Anyway, so he did a sketch and he sent the sketch to Nationalmuseum and they were like, we never told you to do this, please don't send unsolicited pics of the king to us. No thank you. And Kalle was like, this upsets me. And at this point, even the supporters that he had for the Gustav I and II suggestion were turning against him because they didn't like the idea. They didn't like the style of it, they didn't like the colors, the composition, bad painting, according to people. And one thing that might have played into it also was, this is reading a bit between the lines, but in one of the texts that I found about the refusals and people talking about why they were refusing him this opportunity, it says that a Swedish king being surrounded by what according to the art historians at the time were a Sami sorcerer and Sami girls dancing a ritual dance of death was not what we wanted in an epic of Sweden. Now, I'm not calling anyone any R-words, but in the early 20th century, people weren't really being very nice to Sami people. They still aren't being very nice to Sami people, but the Institute of Racial Sciences was just being started and getting into steam. And the suggestion that it would be, there is a Sami influence in the painting is sort of, I can see some of it. It's not what the people are talking about where we see it, but yeah, there is a bit of it in the picture. Now you could see with the girls they're talking about. That would be, someone said Sami maidens. Why would you get that suggestion from this picture? Now, we look at these girls dressed in grey and black, and you can analyze the dress historical aspect of it. I am sure that these art historians are good at their topic of interest. They're not very good at this, as a textile historian, I might say. Because if you look at the samigakti, it's usually a one-part piece of garment. It's a tunic-like garment that is shorter for men and longer for women, generally speaking. And as you can tell, these girls are wearing a skirt and a jacket. It's very obvious that they're divided, and if you know anything about Swedish folk tradition and Swedish folk costume, as Carl Larsson, a folk costume enthusiast in Dalarna, did, then you can tell that this really is very reminiscent of a Delsbo-dräkt, with the black skirt and the striped top and the white shirt peeking in the middle and the little waistband that's woven in several different colors. This is obvious. This is not a big leap to make that this is a blackened version of a Delsbo-dräkt. The Sami influence in the painting isn't with these girls. It is, for example, with this guy, who is wearing something resembling a hornmössa, which is a hat with reindeer antlers in it, and which is normally worn by women. He's also wearing a bringekläde, which is this chest piece that is normally associated with Sami folkwear. Well, I'm not supposed to gender them, but it looks like a man. And he's wearing female clothing, which could be, a ritualistic sense of something, but that's one piece where we see the Sami influence. Also, there are a few kilmössor, which are a proto-tradition in Sami culture, but also exist in Swedish folk costume as well. So you can see there is a bit of borrowing cultural symbols, and Carl Larsson got really chewed out for not being historically accurate and not keeping to one space and time and borrowing things from different points in history. Side note, me comparing these young girls to a Delsbo-dräkt would mean that if we were being accurate, their jackets would be knitted, because Delsbo-dräkter have knitted jackets. That's sort of a hallmark of the costume. However, as once again I have spent 4 years of my life studying this, I can tell you that we do not have very much evidence to show that knitting was a thing in Europe before the High Middle Ages, so like the 14th century. We have some depictions of knitting in religious art, but before that it's not a thing in Northern Europe, which would be, maybe he's placed this somewhere else, but seeing as it is supposed to be Gamla Uppsala, I'd say it's Northern Europe. Just guessing. So I have therefore decided to do this as a sewn work instead of a knitted garment, just for historical inspiration, and it's not an accurate thing. Let's not be HK about this. It's not a reconstruction of a historical garment. It's just something from a painting that was already very theatrical to begin with, but it would be more accurate to the timeline of Norse era Sweden to have a sewn garment with applications instead of a knitted garment with stripes. On the topic of Gakti and their appearance, usually you could interpret these the stripes on the back as something you would see in Sami costumes. Those would be more colorful. Yes, you do have black as a base color in some Gakti, but they have colorful stripes like yellow, green, red, blue, and having this gray-black combination would not be within the ordinary of a Sami costume. I can say that because they actually also consulted a friend who is actually of Sami descent and has sewn several of her own costumes. So it's not just me pulling stuff out of my imagination, which might be what the art historians did. So the painting, Midvinterblot, got refused 2 times by Nationalmuseum and ended up in Lund, and it's sort of, well, the fate of the painting broke Carl Larsson a bit, and he was very sad about it, as anyone would be. And it was actually, it went for a trial run in the place it was supposed to be put up, and the critics really didn't like it, so it was put somewhere else. And then in the 80s, it was sold to Sotheby's in London, who sold it to an art enthusiast in Japan. And for the 1992 exhibition of Carl Larsson's work in Stockholm, they actually lended it back to Sweden, which also apparently fell on the 200-year celebration of a certain local national museum. And they, for the 200, decided that, we like this painting, it was supposed to go here, we want it back, please. Can we buy it from you? What goes around comes around back again when someone else is owning of it. So being that in the 90s the museum actually wanted the painting, they did a fundraising event to buy it back to Sweden, and in 1997 it was bought back and actually put up over the course of the next coming years in the topmost staircase hall where it was supposed to be from the beginning. Yeah, you can go see it if you're in Stockholm. I don't know why you would want to be in Stockholm, but if you are.
So the story is finished, and so is the jacket. As you can see, I made it slightly asymmetrical in the sleeves. I picked my favorite elements from the painting and put them on.
So the jacket is finished, but we're not done. Because if you're looking at the pictures, you can see the girls are wearing something around their necks. And this might be a part of their shirts underneath, or it might be a loose piece of clothing called a nattkappa. It's a sort of collar thing that you would put over your usual shirt for fancy times like Sunday Mass, just to be, wearing your best wardrobe that day. And in the Mora region of Dalarna, where Anders Zorn, for example, a famous painter and friend of Carl Larsson, was based, you would wear a collar thing that is sort of resembling a nattkappa. So this ties into the fact that it would be a folklore-inspired piece of garment. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna make a nattkappa.
So we need some supplies, a bit of lace. I chose eyelet lace, and something to make the rest out of, and then you just start assembling. I usually go like this, and then it's done.
And it's 4 in the morning, and I am out of bed. Du gömda dalar, dit världens larm ej når, dväljs du i skogens salar, där högtidsstillhet rår.
Sorry, I've been up since 4 in the morning to shoot that, so. Anyway, that's what I would wear if I were invited to the Slaying of a King. Leave a comment down below what you would like to see me recreate from a Carl Larsson painting next time, or your favorite outfit to the sacrifice of the God's chosen one. Remember to subscribe if you liked this, and happy equinox. Tack för hänget, gänget.